Welcome back, everybody, to the Daily Racing Show here at RacePlazaMedia. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And today is the last F1 recap of the year.
Of 2024.
We just finished watching the last Grand Prix of the year in Abu Dhabi at the Yas Marina circuit.
Yes.
Before we get into the race, the first thing I do want to say is like the time that they're racing was like golden hour. So you had the sunset going into the night. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yes, I remember when we first started the race, you were like, oh, it's so light out still.
I thought it would be dark.
Yeah. And then as the race went on, the sun went down, and like you were saying, some of those shots were like a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have taken that for the F1 movie next year or whenever that's coming out.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah, and it's like also like the onboard shots from some of the cars, like looking behind. I think there was an overtake. I don't even remember who it was, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
And then the Yas Marina circuit is in an actual marina.
Yes.
Right there. So there is, I think they kind of, when they built it, maybe had like Monaco as an inspiration. Yeah. But the big advantage is that this is a track, right? So you can actually get really, really cool racing done, kind of like we had today. It was a very great finish.
I think so.
This sensational F1 season.
Yeah, it wasn't the most exciting race of the season, but it was a good race because there was a lot of things that happened.
Absolutely.
Especially right at the beginning that kind of put everything on edge. So why don't we just get started?
Yeah, so going into the race, I think the big thing that was still on the line was obviously the Constructors Championship.
Yes, correct.
We had McLaren leading the way and then Ferrari close enough behind. However, the McLarens did have a 1-2 lockout. So we had Lando Norris in P1 and Oscar Piastri starting from P2. Then we had, I think on third, it was Sainz.
Yes.
Right? However, then all the way in
19th,
because of the grid penalty.
Yes.
And because qualifying went okay for
Charles, because one of his times was deleted because of track limits.
So he didn't make it into Q3.
He was in Q3, but then
was ninth.
Yeah, exactly, because one of his lap times didn't count. So then, plus the 10th-place grid penalty put him back into 19th, which was already like, I mean, there was a lot of pressure on them because there was a lot of points to make up.
Correct.
And notoriously this season, both McLarens have been pretty decent, unless there's some kind of outside forces that would impede them.
And that leads us into turn one. And we have actually Max Verstappen getting off the line in P4.
He was right behind Oscar.
Getting off the line really, really quick. He actually shut down the door to Sainz. So Sainz actually did not have an optimal start whatsoever. However, then he did make a lunge into turn one. I will say, I know that he ended up making that turn and then Oscar was on the outside. However, they ended up colliding. Oscar spun out on the outside and then Oscar ended up being overtaken by everyone, whereas Max got a lot luckier. He did a 360, but he was still on track, so he was able to just kind of continue on, and he didn't have anyone, he wasn't required to let anyone pass him to make a safe entry
because he was already on the racetrack, so he was able to rejoin like in the middle of the pack. He definitely lost several positions,
absolutely,
but I mean it was such a huge upset in the first turn that definitely hurt McLaren. There was, with Lando still in the lead, there was still a big chance that they would take it unless something would also happen to Lando, which is not unlikely. I mean, even David Coulthard had said it in the pre-race interview. He was like, yeah, it's up to the race gods because anything can really happen.
You could easily pick up a puncture. There could be technical failure. So nothing that Lando would have had control over.
Yeah, because Lando is, I would say he's pretty consistent. He does a good job. He doesn't make he hasn't made mistakes, of course, but I mean, I'm sure he also knew what was on the line. So going into that, I was like, ooh.
Well, also him finding out probably pretty quickly that Oscar was taken out, the pressure was on him because before we get into what everything else happened in like lap one is Charles had a fantastic opening lap. I think after like turn 3 or turn 4, he was already in the points. He of course he got a little bit lucky. That's just the way it goes. But he was able to jump a few positions because ahead of him not only Verstappen and Piastri got together, but also Bottas and Checo had an incident going into turn 1.
Yeah, which I also have to say, with both of these incidents happening in turn 1, with all these cars being so close together, I'm surprised nothing worse happened, because none of the drivers at that point were taken out of the race.
Yes.
They all spun, and it hurt them, of course.
Yep.
But one, it's impressive that nobody else collided with them, because, I mean, we saw the replay of just the Piastri Verstappen one. It kind of happened directly in front of Carlos Sainz.
Yes.
But then it opened kind of perfectly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, for him to make it through. Then, of course, the Checo Bottas thing happened in the middle of the pack, so that nobody else was really majorly impeded by it, was really surprising. And then, of course, not only did Leclerc have an excellent start after the first lap, he ended up being in P8, which is like, starting from 19th, he made up 11 positions.
I think on turn 3 he was able to go around the outside,
yes,
where there was another incident, and then he jumped a bunch of positions, having more traction, I guess, more grip. Just went around, and then he was already up in the points, and it was insane. And he was definitely a man on a charge to date.
Yes, and also who had a great start was Kevin Magnussen, because I think he made up 7 positions right at the start. And he also said in his post-race interview that he wanted to just like charge. He had it in his feelings, or like he felt it today, that today was the day for him to have a good start, and he just went for it, and it worked out beautifully. Then I mean, it's also nice because we all know that it was going to be his last race for several drivers. It was going to be the last race, or the last race with their current team. So it was a big emotional race day. With lots of exciting things, especially first lap. I mean, we had the great laps, we had some colliding happening, and then unfortunately, so Max and Bottas both got 10-second penalties because of it. And it's just so heartbreaking that Checo wasn't able to finish the first lap. He had another spin out, a couple I wrote down, and turn 10 was his second spin out. He didn't really crash with anybody for that one. And then he retired.
Lost the drive of the car, they said. I don't know.
Oh, again?
That's what they... No, so, yeah. So, essentially, I guess the car wasn't... he wasn't able to move it anymore.
Oh, gotcha.
And I will say, I don't know at this point if he did pick up damage from the Bottas incident. And if that ended up causing that, it's, of course, very unfortunate, because Checo's future is very much up in the air at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that they're going to have a meeting coming up in which will be decided what's going to happen in his future.
Especially because like the first half, or maybe the first quarter of the season, he actually did quite well. And then it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. And then we had, at some point during the summer, we're all already kind of like doubting what is going to happen.
Yeah.
I think then Danny was cut. And then all of a sudden there was this big announcement that Checo got another 2-year deal, I think, with Red Bull.
I think that happened before Danny was cut, but it was still, at that point, it was a little bit surprising.
Yeah,
because it happened quite soon into the season, and that was already at a point of the season where Checo wasn't quite as strong. But it might have been strategic on terms of Red Bull to just kind of be like, hey, you're good. You have a contract. Just finish strong. You don't have to worry about that part anymore. But that unfortunately didn't help, because I mean, he's had many Q1 or Q2 exits for qualifying. He had several races where he didn't even end up in the points. He had, of course, unfortunately, like, I'm not saying that today's DNF was his fault, but I mean, that's just also just such a bummer that potentially his F1 career ended on a DNF. And he's unfortunately also not the only one.
Yes. There was also Bottas, who ended up having to retire the car. He had 2 incidents. So one time, the incident in lap 1 with Checo, and then later on when Magnussen was trying to pass him, he was trying to brake late with old tires, and he admitted that it was his fault. He ended up locking up and then crashing into the side of Magnussen, and then they ended up having to retire the car because he also ended up, I think, breaking the front right axle.
I mean, once he made it back into the pits, it looked quite busted.
There was no way they were going to be able to fix that. If this was maybe Le Mans, where they can kind kind of reassemble a whole car. Sure.
But they also have the time to maybe make up the time for
exactly, but not doing this, which is really unfortunate. The good thing is it seems like we might be, at least Bottas will still be around F1 as the potential reserve driver for Mercedes. I don't think it's been confirmed yet. For Checo, it would be obviously very devastating if how his F1 career ends.
Yeah.
With Magnussen, also the end of his F1 career. He's been here for 10 years. It's his last season. And then...
But Magnussen didn't DNF. He finished the race. But who also DNF'd, unfortunately, was Franco Colapinto. Quite early on, he had to retire the car as well.
Not due to his mistake. He ended up being rear-ended by Piastri.
Who got a 10-second penalty for it,
that
too.
as well. I guess he said his diffuser picked up a lot of damage. And
because at first it looked like it might have been just a tire puncture, so we're like, oh, okay, that's fixable. But then they announced that they have to retire the car, which is just such a bummer because he's had 6 races now with Williams. He showed some great driving throughout the season. He also unfortunately cost them a lot of money in terms of some of the crashes that he had, which is a little bit of a bummer. I hope that doesn't impede him from a future in F1. I don't think he'll be on the grid next season, not as a permanent driver at least.
Maybe he'll get a reserve driver seat, and then we have Jack Doohan, who had his first F1 race of the year and his career, and he was Alpine's reserve driver for a while. If you guys were not particularly familiar with him, you usually saw him in the post-race interviews. He was there a lot of times, so he just had to kind of wait it out, and maybe that's the same thing with Franco, that he has to wait it out, because the problem is also if you're a rookie and you're crashing a lot and then you're driving for a team like Williams, who is already kind of broke, you know, it's just a cost onto cost onto cost.
I mean, that's what happened to Logan Sargent. I do believe Franco drove better or raced better than Logan Sargent did, but Logan Sargent also cost him a lot of money. Mick Schumacher unfortunately had cost Haas quite a bit of money because of some unlucky...
And then Williams is doing what Haas did. They moved away from the rookies, right? Haas had 2 rookies, right, with Mazepin and Mick. Then and then they were like, okay, Mazepin, you gotta go. And then they got Magnussen
for various reasons.
Various reasons, I mean, this guy, no one wants this dude back. But and then they were like, okay, Mick, you're also costing the team that has the lowest operational funds. Too much money, and like it's very unfortunate for Mick, right? And I wish him all the best in the WEC, right? But it's like when you're costing the team that already doesn't have a lot of money more, you know? It's just devastating. And now next year in Williams, we'll have 2 seasoned drivers. You have Carlos Sainz and you have Alex Albon in there. So drivers who are established, who are not that big in crashing. I mean, Albon did have a few accidents this year.
Well, I mean, we'll break down the next year's grid in a future video where we'll look back on the 2024 season of F1. But I mean, that definitely has an effect. The last person that ended up DNFing was Liam Lawson. I was going to say Liam Neeson. He's not on the grid. Liam Lawson, unfortunately, had to DNF. He had a little bit of bad luck for this race anyways, because he went into the pits, then they didn't attach the front left tire properly. He had to come back for them to adjust it. Now the team will potentially also get a fine for unsafe release.
Then they will get a fine for that.
I mean, they haven't announced it yet, that's why I'm saying tentatively. And then a little bit later in the race, almost at the end of the race, his car started smoking and things, so he had to retire, which is a bummer. Of course, he and Yuki are both potentially in contention for Checo's seat. We will see if that'll happen, or if maybe Isaac Hadjar will maybe take it. I mean, there's lots of different people up for that seat, but maybe by the next video we'll know officially. So we had 4 DNFs in the last race, which is a little bit of a bummer for those drivers, of course, but we did have some really great moments of the race as well. I would say we'll just take it from the top, Lando won, which allowed McLaren to win their first Constructor Championship in 26 years. The last time they had a Constructor Championships, and I'm sure if you watch Formula One, you already know this by now, but the fact that David Coulthard was part of McLaren,
who commentated the race,
exactly, was part of the team the last time they won the Constructor Championship, and I believe Andrew Newey was their engineer at the time too, is wild.
Yeah.
26 years. So that was in the 90s.
That's a long time.
It's such a long time. So it's so happy. And I was also so happy to see Lando was so excited about it. I mean, he had some tears in his eyes. I might have had a couple of tears in my eyes. Zach was, of course, so excited too.
Absolutely.
I mean, we love Zach.
He's gonna get another tattoo.
Yes.
He's gonna get a neck tattoo or something like that.
McLaren. And then also Piastri, of course, Piastri had bad luck at the start with Max. Then he got the 10-second penalty for hitting Franco. He did make it into the points. He ended up coming in 10th, which is great. And at the end of the post-race interview, he was also like, well, yes, it was a little bit of a bummer that things didn't go quite as well for him, but it's whatever. The team won, and that was the big goal. That was the important thing for today's race, as my hair falls apart. But yeah, so that's very, very exciting.
And then we had in second and third place the two Ferraris. Carlos Sainz came in P2, which also was, I think, of course, he wanted to get that win in there. However, we had a virtual safety car after lap 1 because there was just a bunch of stuff going on. And then he just completely messed up the restart. After the restart of the with the virtual safety car, he was already 3.5 seconds down on Lando.
Almost immediately.
Like he gave him so much space. And then the race restarted, and then you're just like, and essentially then he was just defending against the guy behind him.
Yeah.
And it was a big mess up, I would say, on his end.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. I think it would have been very difficult to still challenge Lando for that, because the the McLaren is just incredibly fast, especially in clean air.
And on that track lent itself to the McLaren. But on the other hand, Leclerc, who ended up coming in third after starting in 19th, just also speaks to how good the Ferrari was on the track. So maybe there could have been a little bit more fighting going on between Carlos and Lando, because really the only way Ferrari could have won it is if Lando wouldn't have won it. They would have had more chances, you know?
Yeah.
Just based on the points, but yeah.
And then if Carlos would have won the race, then he would have actually also overtaken Oscar Piastri in the Drivers' Championship. He would have then taken 4th, because there's 2 points between the two of them.
Yes.
So that would have been also nice for him, because he knows he's going to Williams next year. Not a car that is really fighting for podiums.
At this point
They're
in time,
barely fighting for points, so it will be very, very difficult. Of course, it will be nice if they are able to turn the car around. I think the big team also the team that really turned around their car this year is Alpine.
I know.
I mean, Nico Hülkenberg did say it in his post-race interview that the big loss that they had of the year, and how they lost that fight for the 6th place in the Constructors' Championship to Alpine was the Sao Paulo race in Brazil. Them having a double podium just really broke Haas's neck, because Haas has been very consistent, I would say, and they've gotten better. Yeah. But them getting those 2 podiums, which is so unlikely.
Yeah, and
for
so many points.
Yeah.
So many points.
So many points. You know, they got 18 and 15.
Yeah, well, but also it's
P2 and P3. Yeah. So they immediately jumped a bunch of, I think, 3 Constructors Championship positions after that weekend, and that's huge.
Yeah, especially also after starting the season. The first 2/3 of the season, Alpine was shit.
Yeah, I mean, they called it the French tractor.
Bad. Yeah, it's so bad. But anyways, I wanted to go back to the order, because of course we said Carlos second, Charles came in third, which was absolutely beautiful. Of course, he was very sad about it.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to do 4th. That's why.
But no, I know.
Gang signs.
But you can, okay. And now in 4th place,
44.
Sir Lewis Hamilton. How exciting. Also, he started in 16th. He started in 16th because of grid penalties and stuff like that. He had
down.
qualified in 18th originally.
Yeah, he already got super unlucky in qualifying.
Yes.
Mercedes definitely messed up them waiting for both drivers, but especially Lewis to send him out that late.
Yes.
He ended up getting caught in traffic, so his outlap, he was already slowed down, and then like Kevin Magnussen did the right thing. He was trying to get out of the way of the drivers who are on a flying lap to go do their last lap, but then he ended up hitting a bollard that flew right in front of Lewis. Lewis had no chance to dodge it, and that ended up being stuck underneath his car. It wasn't for the whole lap, but it was underneath.
I mean, it was for majority of the lap.
So it impacted him quite a bit, and he only lost 0.2, which is insane.
I mean, that just showed today because he had the pace today. I mean, he started so far back, and then at the end, I think, how many laps did he have? I think he had 15 laps to make up like 14 seconds to Russell, and he did it. He made up almost a second every single lap. I think it was 0.9 something. I mean, incredible.
He was also in the opposite strategy of everyone else that was kind of fighting in the front. He started on the hards. He took them really, really long, obviously, and then he switched to the medium tire, so you obviously have an advantage. But it's also he was very, very fast, and it was also... of course, it would have been great if he made it on the podium, but at least he made it into the points. He made it into the top 5.
Yeah.
He had a good race, and it's a good way to end this part of, he's been at Mercedes for 12 years now. And so it would have really been unfortunate if he also would have ended in a DNF where he would have not even made it into the points. And the good thing is, the team was pretty solid besides that qualifying call. And they were really solid on the strategy and everything. And him and Bono, obviously his racing engineer, they've had a long relationship, and it would have been a huge bummer, I think, for everyone if he would have had a bad last race, because we all know that he had a lot of bad weekends this year. I mean, some of them maybe his own fault. A lot of them, I would also say, him having to drive experimental setups and stuff like that. And, I'm not arguing that Mercedes did the wrong thing. You are going to take the driver who's not going to race for you. You're not going to let him be part of the meetings anymore. You obviously will also want to boost the guy who's going to be the team leader next year, who will have a rookie by his side.
Yes.
So, I'm not going to fault them, and I don't want to go into this whole conspiracy thing, because in the end, I think people like to overthink
Of course, yeah, but it was nice, like you said, that Lewis was able to end it on a higher note. He was able to do his donuts at the end in front of the grandstands. He had a little stand for himself to celebrate his time at Mercedes.
Yeah.
He also took a little beautiful moment with the car at the end, because I'm sure he was so emotional, this being an end of a huge era, the most successful partnership in F1 history. So just to say goodbye to that. But I think there's definitely a glimmer of hope in his future based on how Ferrari has especially ended this season.
Ferrari had a tough start to the season, but then also Fred, I think, is really a huge turning point for Ferrari.
Yes, 100%.
They have, I think, the last 2 years we had these Ferrari, or not just 2 years, for years we had this Ferrari clown memes, that they don't know how to do strategy calls, they don't know to do, and plenty of times this year Ferrari has shown that they have what it takes, right? I mean, the Monza win was the huge thing where Ferrari made that call, and Leclerc ended up winning. So this is a huge I think boost also going into the season. Speaking about Leclerc was very, very bummed that they were not able to get the Constructors Championship. I think he also wanted to, the 4 years now that he was driving alongside Carlos, I think he would have liked to end that on a win together with him. He seemed very, very disappointed at the end. I think maybe he also wanted to show that maybe he could also do it without Lewis.
I think that might be actually a good theory, yes.
Because everyone obviously keeps bringing up, and also in his post-race interview is next year, the greatest of all drivers will be with you. And then he's like, hey, listen, let me just really
in this moment, celebrate Carlos.
Exactly. Because like he's not gonna hear the end of this.
No, for sure. It's gonna be interesting. But then Max came in 6th.
Yeah.
Pierre Gasly came in 7th, which was another beautiful result for Alpine. Then you already touched on Nico Hülkenberg came in 8th, which was just not quite enough for Haas, especially with Magnussen having just a little bit of an unlucky race.
Yeah.
It was nice to see Fernando Alonso back in the points with 9th. And then, like we said, Oscar Piastri was able to come back into the points at the very end.
Sorry, I don't know what I did there. I did wanted to take a look at the Constructors Championship.
I forgot
again.
that you wanted to read something too.
I want to finish this video with this one. But so we have McLaren in first place with 666 points.
The devil.
Then we have Ferrari with 652 points. Red Bull, for the second time, Max Verstappen has now become World Drivers' champion without winning the Constructors Championship with 589 points. I mean, he carried that team hard, man. He did everything he could do.
Seriously.
Then we have Mercedes in fourth place with 468 points. Also kind of by themselves, we have Aston Martin with 94 points.
That's crazy. I didn't realize this. So Mercedes, just to emphasize, 468 points. Then Aston Martin... Whoa, Woza, where did you go? Aston Martin, 94 points.
And out of those 94 points, I just wanted to look it up because it really fucked me off this year. When people were like, "Oh, Stroll is out
performing Alonso,
qualifying Alonso." Alonso has scored 70 out of those 94 points. 70.
Yes. Oh man. Anyways, then we have Alpine ended up taking the 6th place with 65 points. Haas ended up coming in 7th with 58 points, which is huge for Haas. I mean, what a great season it has been for them, truly. RB, Visa Cash App, Honda, whatever it's called, 46. Williams, 17. And Kick Sauber with the beautiful 4 points earned by Zhou last weekend. So also, glad that they didn't end it on 0.
Zhou also having his last race this today ended up in 13th place. So for a lot of racers, it's kind of like we have a lot of people leaving. It's very cool. We also have a lot of people joining. I think if you look at the drivers' standings, we have 24 racers this year. We had on a grid.
Oh, because we had a couple visitors.
We had a couple of visitors. We had people obviously leaving and stuff like that mid-season. So it was it's kind of cool because you also get to see a lot of them obviously coming back.
Yes,
it's cool that Jack was able to get in at least one Grand Prix in there.
Yes, which is I think it was a great experience for him just to also spend 58 laps in the car and behind the wheel.
And he did well. Like I think him just like staying, not getting into any of the carfuffles, especially the first, because he did start from the back and there was a lot that was happening there, and then him able to make up a few positions and stuff like that. So really, really good on him. And of course, we hope that his season next year will go really, really well.
Yes. All right. So let's.
So what I wanted to finish this on. So we're gonna go back a little bit to Lewis. So Fred Vasseur was asked about Lewis Hamilton leaving the team of his life. The team of his life. We will judge it in 2 years. Thank you. and he laughed. It didn't always go well. He's someone quite sensitive who needs to be surrounded, supported, loved. He could have had the feeling that it was not always the case this season. After I think we smelled the blood, or at least smell of Russell in front today, he put everything back and showed that he's quick. I was never worried. I know what he has in mind. I think for us it will all be added value in addition. Be an added value in addition. Sorry, this was all written, and I know that but yeah, so it's really good to hear. And of course, what is Fred gonna say? Like, oh, I'm worried now, And he's also the one that pointed out when Lewis made this comment that he's not fast anymore. I do first of all agree that Lewis is someone who's very like sensitive and emotional in that sense, where he's always like,
Yeah. Well, he did say that this year was a little bit tough on him mentally, and he's handled certain moments not quite the way he would like to have. Which is understandable. I mean, they're all humans. There's so much pressure on them. And I can imagine that him being such a legend, such an icon, there's extra pressure on him too, just because
by himself,
of course, that he needs to live up to a standard and he doesn't want to fall behind. And I mean, he still has more to give, and I'm sure 2021 still has a little chip on his shoulder, just understandably so. So he wants to end it in a high note whenever he decides to end his career.
And it's also this thing that's like, you've been with Mercedes so long. In a perfect world, I'm not even saying that he would have won the championship this year, but he would have had more or better weekends. You know, there's a lot of weekends where it's like, Mercedes, what are you guys doing, and stuff like that. But then you also have, like Fred pointed out, that he was like, I'm not worried. In Vegas, he went from 10th all the way up until the gearbox of Russell. Yeah. You know? So it's like he has the pace. Yeah. And he just needs to be in a supportive environment. Yeah. And I think a lot of the Tifosis will welcome him. You know, yeah. And they will love him and give him that support. And I think a lot of people in red are excited for him to join. And I think that will also make the Constructors Championship much more likely next year. Yes. Because for Ferrari, it also has been like, what, 15 plus years now? Yeah. Since they won?
But yeah, we'll talk about that more in our recap video and in our look forward also for next season. But chime in the comments. Did you watch this last race? Let us know your thoughts on it. And yeah, chime in, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys again here tomorrow, where we take a look at the F2 as well as F1 Academy finales, plural. Bye guys.